Okay, so this is the Gemara. This is the Daf Yomi, so we're in Avodah Zarah, Daf 57. Before I start, I want to mention there was a comment. It got held by YouTube, but basically the idea that why can't a Jew and a Gentile press grapes together? So it is possible, but it's prohibited from the Jew to derive benefit from it and various things like that. So like if you have an employer and you working for the employer to press grapes amongst Gentiles, but anyway, grape juice is seen as a separate thing. It's not just seen as just like a typical food item. It's seen as a ritual object. So just like a Gentile can't make tefillin and mezuzot and sefer Torahs and stuff like that, a Gentile can't participate in the manufacturing of grape juice. It's its own separate category. It's its own separate food item. It has a special, unique blessing before it's consumed and after it's consumed. Whereas like some groups of food, they're just like categorical blessings. Whereas grape juice, wine, it has its own specific blessing, standalone blessing. So it is a religious item. But anyway, to continue, the prohibitions go back to, it really stems from idolatry and idolatrous libations. So, but anyway, continuing, it says, I should delay my ruling as if I find a Tana, and a Tana is from the Mishnah, who prohibits the wine in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Natan. I will prohibit even deriving benefit from it. This is difficult. So Rabbi Natan prohibits one from deriving benefit from wine that was touched by a Gentile, as it is taught in a Braita. If a Gentile measured a Jew's wine, whether he measured it with his hand or with his foot, it may be sold. So that means you're deriving benefit from it. So Rabbi Natan says if he measured it with his hand, it is prohibited, but if he measured it with his foot, it is permitted. So the Gemara explains why the suggestion that Shmuel delayed his ruling because of the opinion of Rabbi Natan is difficult. Say that Rabbi Natan said that the wine is forbidden when the Gentile measured it with his hand. Did he say that the wine is forbidden if he measured it with his foot? Rather, Shmuel delayed ruling on the matter because he thought to himself, if I find another Tana who permits the wine in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who holds that if a Gentile touches wine without intending to render it a libation, it is permitted. So that's a different line of thought. I will permit the wine even for drinking. And if we remember from the last off, he had delayed his ruling for a long time. So there was a certain incident in Biram that occurred as follows. There was a certain Gentile who was climbing a palm tree, and he brought down with him a palm branch. While he was descending from the tree, he unintentionally touched some wine with the tip of the palm branch. So Rav permitted the owners to sell the wine to Gentiles. Rav Kahana and Rav Ashi said to Rav, but wasn't it you, Master, who said, if a Gentile baby who is 1 day old touches the wine, he renders it wine used for a libation, even though he lacks any intent? Rav said to them, say that I said that the baby renders the wine prohibited for drinking. Did I say that it is prohibited to derive benefit from it? It is therefore permitted to sell the wine. So the Gemara cites Rav's statement in order to discuss the matter itself. So Rav says if a Gentile boy who is 1 day old touches wine, he renders it wine used for a libation, even though he lacks any intent. So Rav Shimi Bar Chia raised an objection to the statement of Rav from Braita. With regard to one who purchases from the Gentile slaves who have been circumcised but have not immersed in a ritual bath, and also with regard to the sons of the Gentile maidservants who grew up in a Jew's home and were circumcised but did not immerse in a ritual bath, their conversion is not yet valid. So they have the legal status of Gentiles who transmit impurity like a tzav. And a man who experiences a gonorrhea like this, experiences a discharge. So their spittle and objects upon which they tread, even if they are found in the marketplace, are ritually impure. But some say that they are ritually pure. Okay, the Braita continues, with regard to their wine, the adults render the wine that they touch wine used for a libation, but the minors do not render the wine that they touch wine used for a libation. And this is specifically referring to this idea that there was someone who has children that were raised in a Jewish home, circumcised but did not immerse in a ritual bath. So those are the two main prerequisites for conversion, aside from accepting the commandments upon yourself. But anyway, But the minors do not render the wine that they touch wine used for libation, in which slaves are considered adults, in which slaves are considered minors. Those are questions, I'm sorry. The adults are those who know the nature of idol worship and its accessories, and the minors are those who do not know the nature of idol worship and its accessories. And in any event, the Baraita teaches that with regard to adults, yes, the wine they touch is rendered prohibited, but with regard to minors, no, the wine they touch is not rendered prohibited. This contradicts the statement of Rav. So the Gemara replies, interpret the distinction between adults and minors as referring to the sons of maidservants. Since they were raised in a Jewish home, there is less reason for concern lest they render the wine an idolatrous libation, and therefore the sages did not prohibit wine touched by minors. This distinction does not apply in the case of slaves who were purchased from Gentiles. The Gemara asks, doesn't the Baraita say that the halacha applies to slaves purchased from Gentiles and also to the sons of Gentile maidservants, indicating that there is no differentiation between them? The Gemara replies, the Baraita equates the two cases only with regard to the impurity of their spittle and the objects upon which they tread. The Gemara asks, this works out well according to the one who says that their spittle and the objects upon which they tread are impure, but according to the one who says that they are pure, what can be said? If the spittle of the slaves and the objects upon which they tread are pure, clearly the halacha is the same in the case of the sons of maidservants, and it is unnecessary to state this. One may therefore conclude that the Baraita equated the two cases with regard to the status of the wine that they touch. Okay. The Gemara replies, even if the Baraita is equating the two cases with regard to the status of the wine that they touch, it is not equating them with regard to the distinction between adults and minors. Rather, this teaches us that the halacha with regard to slaves is similar to the halacha with regard to the sons of maidservants. Just as in the case of the sons of maidservants, it is only those who were circumcised but did not immerse who render the wine that they touch wine used for libation, but those who are circumcised and immersed do not. So too in the case of slaves, once they have immersed in a ritual bath, they do not render wine prohibited. This halacha is to the exclusion of that which Rav Nachman says that Shmuel says. As Rav Nachman says that Shmuel says, in the case of one who purchased slaves from the Gentiles, even though the slaves were circumcised and immersed in a ritual bath, they still render the wine that they touch wine used for libation. As they are accustomed to idolatrous practices until reference to idol worship disappears from their mouths. The Baraita teaches us that their wine is not prohibited. The Gemara cites the aforementioned statement in order to discuss the matter itself. So Rav Nachman says that Shmuel says, in the case of one who purchases slaves from the Gentiles, even though the slaves were circumcised and immersed in a ritual bath, they still render the wine that they touch wine used for libation, as they are accustomed to idolatrous practices, until reference to idol worship disappears from their mouths. And how much time does this take? Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, one does not assume that the slave has forgotten his idolatrous worship until 12 months have passed. All right, so Rabbah raised an objection to Rav Nachman from the aforementioned Baraita. With regard to one who purchases from the Gentiles slaves that have been circumcised but have not immersed in a ritual bath, and also with regard to the sons of the Gentile maidservants who grew up in a Jew's home and were circumcised but did not immerse in a ritual bath, their conversion is not valid, and they have the legal status of Gentiles. Their spittle and objects upon which they tread, even if they are found in the marketplace, are ritually impure. Because like all Gentiles, they're considered to have the status of being ritually impure because they don't follow purity laws. And you see that, this is a case where they didn't go to a ritual bath. They didn't go to a mikvah. They didn't do tevilah. So that's the case there. But that stuff more or less only applies when the temple is standing. So without the temple, it's almost meaningless. And I think I'm not exactly sure what the understanding is today, but I think the understanding is that everybody today is basically, has that ritual impurity status because of corpse impurity and all sorts of things. If when we get to the Mishnah Torah, when we get to the book that deals with ritual impurity and how it's transmitted and things like that, it's pretty complicated, and it goes to show that there's a lot of ritual impurity that's being transmitted today, and we don't have the proper means to deal with it, the proper structure. But it all came down to like the whole idea of purifying yourself to go to the temple. That's the main juxt of it. So, all right. Okay. Even if they found some say that they are ritually pure. So with regard to their wine, the adults render the wine that they touch wine used for a libation, but the minors do not render the wine that they touch wine used for libation. Which slaves are considered adults and which slaves are considered minors? The adults are those who know the nature of idol worship and its accessories, and the minors are those who do not know the nature of idol worship and its accessories. In any event, the Baraita teaches that with regard to those slaves who were circumcised but did not immerse, yes, the wine they touch is prohibited, but with regard to those who were circumcised and immersed, no, the wine they touch is not prohibited, even if they have not yet forgotten their idolatrous worship. The Gemara replies, interpret this halacha as referring only to the sons of maidservants who were raised in a Jewish home and never engaged in idolatrous worship, but not to slaves who were acquired from Gentiles. The Gemara asks, doesn't the Baraita teach that the halacha applies to slaves purchased from Gentiles and also to the sons of Gentile maidservants, indicating that there is no differentiation between them? So the Gemara replies, the Baraita equates the two cases only with regard to the impurity of their spittle and the objects upon which they tread. The Gemara asks, this works out well according to the one who says that their spittle and the objects upon which they tread are impure, but according to the one who says that they are pure, what can be said? If the spittle of the slaves and the objects upon which they tread are pure, clearly the same halacha applies in the case of the sons of maidservants, and it is unnecessary to state this. So one may therefore conclude that the Baraita equated the two cases with regard to the status of the wine that they touch. The Gemara answers, even if the Baraita equates the slaves and the sons of the maidservants with regard to the status of their wine, it does not intend to compare their status once they have immersed. Rather, this teaches us that the halacha with regard to slaves is similar to the halacha with regard to sons of maidservants. Just as in the case of the sons of maidservants, it is only the adults who render the wine that they touch wine used for libation, but minors do not render the wine they touch wine used for libation. So too in the case of slaves, the adults render the wine that they touch wine for a libation, but minors do not render the wine they touch libation wine. Okay, this halacha is to the exclusion of that which Rav says. As Rav says, if a Gentile baby who is 1 day old touches wine, he renders it wine for a libation. The Baraita teaches us that this is not the case. So the Gemara relates, there was a certain incident in Mechoza in which a Gentile came and entered the store of a Jew. The Gentile said to the owners, do you have any wine to sell? They said to him, no. There was wine sitting in a bucket. The Gentile put his hand in it and stirred the wine around. The Gentile said to them, this is not wine. The other person, the store owner, took the bucket and, in his hanger, threw its contents into a barrel of wine. The incident raised a dilemma with regard to the status of wine in the barrel. So Rava permitted the owner to sell the wine to Gentiles, as he held that it is permitted to derive benefit from the wine. So Rav Huna bar Hinana and Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nachman, disagreed with him. Blast of shofarot went out from the court of Rava, promulgating his ruling, and they permitted the sale. And blast of shofarot went out from the court of Rav Huna bar Hinana and Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nachman, promulgating their ruling, and they prohibited the sale.